My son gave his wife $150,000. I got nothing. When he failed and I succeeded, they sued me for it. I learned that on an ordinary afternoon, standing in my own kitchen, holding a thin envelope that felt heavier than it should have. The return address belonged to a law office in town. I didn't open it right away. I already knew something was wrong. My name is Maribel Hayes. I am 59. I have lived in Madison most of my adult life. I worked, saved, paid my bills, and built a quiet life that never depended on anyone else. That afternoon, I had just finished sorting paperwork at the table when someone knocked. A man asked me to confirm my name, then handed me the envelope and left before I could say anything else. Inside were legal papers. My son's name was there, so was his wife's. They were suing me. The claim said I had benefited unfairly, that my stability had come at their expense. I read the words twice, slowly, as if they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. One line stood out more than the rest. It listed the financial support my son had given his wife. $150,000. Another line noted what I had received from them. Nothing. I folded the papers and sat down. The house was quiet. For the first time, I understood that this wasn't about money. It was about what they believed I owed them, simply for surviving without help. I didn't learn about the money from my son. I heard it from someone else. The way things always seem to reach you when they're already decided. We wanted you to know. He said on the phone later that night, his voice careful, practiced. We helped them get started. How I asked. There was a pause. We gave her $150,000. I held the phone tighter. It's for both of them, he said quickly. She just needed it in her account. You know how banks are. I didn't say anything. Silence has a way of making people explain themselves. She's younger, he continued. She's trying to build something. We didn't want them struggling. I see, I said. You've always been fine. Mom, he added, you don't need help. You're strong. The word landed the way it always did, like a compliment that doubled as a boundary. I remembered sitting at the same kitchen table years earlier, telling him I might need help replacing the roof. He'd smiled then too, told me I always figured things out. And I had. I always did. That money. I said slowly. Was that something you talked about with me? No, he said. Why would we? It's our decision. Not family, not conversation. Just ownership. It's not about you, he said. Sharper now. Don't make it that. I didn't raise my voice, but I didn't make anything. I said, I wasn't even invited into it. Another pause. I could hear someone else in the room with him, whispering. His wife. Probably. You'll understand eventually. He said, this was necessary. Necessary for them. Invisible to me. We ended the call politely. No yelling. No accusations. When I set the phone down, I realized something had shifted. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just enough that something I thought was mine, my place. My voice had quietly been taken out of the equation. He called me the morning after I was served. Not to ask how I was. Not to explain. Just to make sure I understood what was happening. You've seen the papers. He said. I have. I replied. This didn't have to go this way. He continued. But you left us no choice. I took a breath. By doing what you did, he said, his voice tight. You always had advantages. You used them. We didn't. Name one. I said. He hesitated. You had stability. You had time. You didn't have anyone depending on you. So I'm being sued for managing my own life, I said. That's not what I said, he snapped. You interfered. Every time I tried to build something, you were there, acting like you knew better. I offered advice when you asked. I said, you ignored it. That's not the point. He said, the point is fairness. Fairness, I repeated. You didn't need help, he said. We did. Giving my wife money was fair, and taking my home would be fair too, I asked. There was silence on the line. When he spoke again, his voice had hardened. You have more than you need. We're barely staying afloat. That's not my doing. I said, You could have stepped aside. He said, You could have shared what I asked, the years I worked, the money I saved. You're twisting this. He said, You always do. I felt the ground shift, not because of what he said, but because of how easily he believed it. Fair had become a word that meant whatever justified the outcome he wanted. I wasn't born strong. I was trained. When I was 27, the factory I worked for closed without warning. 2 weeks' notice. A cardboard box for my things. A supervisor who wouldn't meet my eyes. You'll land on your feet, my mother said when I told her. You always do. I waited for her to offer more. She didn't. I took a job that paid less. Then another on weekends. When rent went up, I moved into a smaller place without telling anyone I was scared. When my car broke down, I took the bus for 6 months and told people I preferred it that way. You're so independent. My sister once said, I wish I was like you. Independence sounds better when it's a choice. Years later, when I bought my house, the bank officer looked at my paperwork and nodded. You did this on your own. I told my son that night. I bought a house. That's great, Mom. He said, See, you always figure things out. No offer to celebrate. No question about how tight the numbers were. Just confirmation of the role I'd already been assigned. When the roof started leaking a decade later, I mentioned it over dinner. You'll handle it, he said, smiling. You always do. So I did. I paid contractors. I worked overtime. I learned which problems were worth mentioning and which ones were better kept quiet. Over time. Asking for help felt less like a right and more like a failure. Now, reading the lawsuit, I saw the pattern clearly. My self-reliance had been convenient. It freed them from obligation. It let them give more to those who demanded it and call the imbalance natural. Strong didn't mean supported. It meant overlooked. And somewhere along the way, surviving on my own had stopped being something they respected and started being something they resented. The first time his business collapsed. He told me it was bad timing. The market turned, he said, pacing while he talked. Anyone could have failed. What was your plan if it did? I asked. I didn't think it would, he replied. You have to take risks. The second time, he blamed other people. They promised partnerships. He said. They backed out. Did you get anything in writing? I asked. He waved his hand. That's not how real opportunities work. The third time, the tone changed. He wasn't explaining anymore. He was defending. You don't understand how hard this is, he snapped. You never tried to build something big. I built my life. I said, slowly. That's the problem, he replied. You always think small at family dinners. The conversations shifted. Not openly. Not all at once. He's under so much pressure, his aunt said. Looking at me, he just needs one win. Someone else added. You could be more supportive, his wife said quietly, as if offering advice. Supportive started to mean agreeing. Silence became consent. Any hesitation was framed as judgment. When the lawsuit arrived, the language was polished, almost impressive in its confidence. It claimed I had interfered, that my stability had made his failures worse, that my example had discouraged him. I read that sentence twice. I had discouraged him by paying my bills, by keeping my house, by not falling apart when things went wrong. You could have stepped back, he said during one of our last calls. You didn't have to keep succeeding right in front of us. I didn't succeed at you, I said. I just kept going. That's easy to say when things work out for you, he replied. That was when I understood. In his version of the story, effort didn't matter. Preparation didn't matter. Only outcomes did. And outcomes were something you either deserved or had stolen. His failures needed a cause. His choices were too painful to examine. So responsibility moved, quietly and neatly, until it landed on me. By the time they filed the lawsuit, the conclusion had already been reached. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was evidence. A reminder that success was possible without shortcuts. And in his mind, that made me guilty. When my lawyer asked me to explain my finances, I didn't hesitate, not because I was confident, but because there was nothing to hide. "Tell me how you built this," she said, sliding a legal pad across the table. "I worked," I said. "Then I worked more." She waited. I took steady jobs. I continued. I stayed when it was boring. I left when it stopped paying the bills. I saved what I could and spent less than I made. She nodded. "Any gifts, loans, family support?" "No," I said. "Not once." I showed her pay stubs that went back decades. Retirement statements I barely looked at anymore. Bank records that told a quiet story: rent, groceries, repairs, deposits made slowly, sometimes painfully. Sometimes, "This house," she said, tapping one page. "You bought it outright." I put down what I'd saved. I said, "Paid the rest month by month." "Anyone help you?" No. No dramatic turning points, no lucky breaks, no one swooping in at the last moment. Just time, discipline, and a refusal to spend money I hadn't earned. My son used to tease me about it. "You live like you're always preparing for something bad." He once said. "I live like I remember when things were bad," I replied. He laughed then. Now he was suing me for it. When the lawyer finished reviewing my documents, she leaned back. "This is clean," she said. "Painfully clean." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not pride exactly, recognition. I didn't build an empire. I built a life that didn't collapse when tested. I built something quiet enough that no one noticed it while they were busy chasing faster wins. And now that it was standing, solid and unremarkable, they wanted it. Not because they needed it to survive, but because it proved something they couldn't accept: that slow work lasts and shortcuts don't. I didn't understand the lawsuit fully until my lawyer read one paragraph out loud. "They're requesting transfer of your primary residence," she said, careful, steady, as compensation. "My house?" I repeated, "Yes." I felt my hands go cold. Not because I was confused, but because something settled into place. "They want me out," I said. She didn't soften it. "They want the asset." When I confronted my son, he didn't deny it. "You have space," he said. "You're alone. We need it more." "This is my home," I said. "I paid for it." "You'll land on your feet," he replied. "You always do." The words sounded familiar. I'd heard them my whole life. They'd always meant someone else didn't want to step in. "You're asking me to give up the one thing I built for myself," I said. "I'm asking you to be reasonable," he said. "You can downsize." "And you can't," I said. "That's different." He snapped. "We're a family." "No," I said quietly. "We were." He went silent. When he spoke again, his voice was tight. "You're choosing a house over us." "I didn't make this a choice," I said. "You did." After the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table and looked around. Nothing fancy, nothing extra. Just walls that had held my life together when no one else was available. That was when I stopped hoping for understanding. This wasn't about fairness or help or repairing anything that had broken. This was about control, about deciding who deserved to stay standing. They didn't see me as their mother anymore. They saw me as something to be redistributed. And once I understood that, something in me hardened, not with anger, but with clarity. Whatever happened next, I wasn't stepping aside. For one night, I considered calling him back, not to apologize, not to give in, just to ask him to stop. I pictured the words leaving my mouth and already felt smaller for it. The next morning, I called a lawyer instead. Her name was Elaine Porter. She listened without interrupting while I explained everything: the money, the lawsuit, the house. When I finished, she didn't rush to reassure me. "They're not confused," she said. "They're strategic." That word landed harder than any insult. "Do people really do this to their own parents?" I asked. "They do it to whoever they think won't fight back," she replied. I told her I didn't want revenge. I just wanted my life left intact. "Then we prepare," she said. The first thing she asked for was proof, not just of what they did, but of what I didn't. Bank records, tax returns, employment history, anything that shows you built this yourself. I went home and opened drawers I hadn't touched in years, old folders, receipts, statements printed and filed long before everything was digital. Each piece of paper felt steadier than the last. As I organized the documents, my sister called. "Maybe you should settle," she said. "People will talk about what I asked, that I defended myself, that you're choosing court over family." "I didn't choose this." I said, "They did." Silence followed. Then softly, "I just don't want you to look like the bad one." I hung up without arguing. That fear had lived in me long enough. When I brought the files to Elaine's office, she stacked them neatly and smiled for the first time. "This tells a very clear story," she said. "What story?" I asked. "That you didn't take anything," she replied, "and they're trying to punish you for it." For the first time since the papers arrived, I slept through the night. Not because the situation had improved, but because I had stopped hoping it would fix itself. Silence had protected everyone else for years. Now it was my turn to be protected by the truth. The room was smaller than I expected. A table, a judge, a quiet weight that made every word feel permanent. Elaine leaned toward me once. "Let me talk," she said. "Answer only what's asked." My son sat across the room. He wouldn't look at me. When he was sworn in, his voice sounded confident, almost relieved. Elaine began gently. "You claim your mother interfered with your financial success. Explain how." "She always had stability," he said. "She didn't struggle like we did." "Stability you're referring to," Elaine said, "was built over decades of employment." "Correct, I guess," he said. "But she didn't need help. And you did," Elaine replied. "How much money did you give your wife?" $150,000. "And how much money did your mother receive from you?" "None." The judge looked up. Elaine continued. "Did your mother ever ask you for financial support?" "No." "Did she discourage you from your business ventures?" "She questioned them." He said, "That affected my confidence." "Did she take any money from you?" Elaine asked. "No." "Did she ask for a share of your earnings?" "No." Elaine nodded and sat. The silence stretched. The judge spoke next. "You're claiming harm," she said calmly. "But what I'm hearing is disappointment." My son straightened. "She had more than us." "More," the judge repeated. "Or longer." He frowned. "What more time? More years of work, more patience." She said, "Those aren't assets you can transfer." When it was my turn, I stood. I didn't interfere. I said, I didn't block anything. I lived my life." The judge studied me. Not coldly, carefully. "You're being sued," she said, "because you didn't fail." That was it. Not shouted. Not dramatic. Just named. The ruling followed quickly. The claims were dismissed. The request for my house denied. Costs assigned to the plaintiffs. My son finally looked at me then. His face wasn't angry anymore. It was confused, as if he'd only just realized that belief. Spoken under oath sounds different than belief repeated at home. I sat back down. My hands were steady. The truth had done what it always does when given room. It stood on its own. The ruling arrived in writing a week later. Dismissed. Sanctions imposed. Costs assigned to them. Not me. Elaine called to confirm, her voice steady. "It's over," she said. "They can't come back with this." "Thank you," I replied. "That house is yours," she added. "It always was. After that." The phone went quiet. No apologies. No explanations. A message from my sister came through once. "They're saying you went too far," she said. "I didn't go anywhere." I answered. I stayed. She didn't reply. My son sent a short text 2 days later. "We didn't think it would end like this." I typed back once. It ended the way it started. Then I put the phone away. In the evenings, I returned to my routines. Bills paid on time, dishes washed, paperwork filed. The house held its shape. The same way it always had, by being cared for, not claimed. One afternoon, Elaine stopped by to drop off the final documents. She hesitated at the door. "You did the right thing," she said. "A lot of people don't. I didn't do it to be right." I said, "I did it to be done." When she left, I made coffee and sat at the table where I'd opened that first envelope. I thought about what the last months had taught me. Not about money, about boundaries. Some people confuse love with access. Others mistake strength for permission. If you don't decide what you will protect, someone else will decide what they can take. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever had to stand your ground, quietly take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, or subscribe for more stories like this. You're not alone in learning these lessons. I kept my home. I kept my name. I kept my life intact. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like more than enough.